Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about my work as a publisher, and to some extent as a writer as well in the Irish language, um, and the publishing house that I set up, and the translation work especially that we do. But first, I just want to give you a really quick um, overview of the Irish language and what it is. Uh, Ireland is and has been for some time predominantly an Anglophone country, but uh, English is not the indigenous language of this island. The indigenous language is Irish, which is also known as Gaelic or Irish Gaelic, but people in Ireland tend to call it Irish, and when people call it Gaelic, well, that's considered to be a kind of a it's more of something that an American tourist might call it, maybe. But the word Gaelic, I'm personally not against it at all. Because it kind of reminds us that we also have a connection, a deep connection with Scots Gaelic speakers or Gaelic speakers in Scotland. Irish Gaelic, Irish and Scots Gaelic are very, very closely related. I have never formally studied Gaelic except for racing through the Duolingo course during the pandemic. But I can read, I can read a newspaper article without much trouble in Gaelic. It's a bit more difficult to understand the spoken language because there have been kind of changes in sounds and things that we don't have in Irish, and there are some kind of older features of Irish because Scots Gaelic it evolved from Middle Irish, so there are some features of Middle Irish that have been lost in Ireland that have been preserved in Scotland. But the wonderful world of social media has kind of brought the two varieties of Gaelic together, and there's quite a lot of interchange, especially on Twitter, back and forward, people tweeting in Gaelic and answering in Irish and getting on quite well. So anyway, the Irish language, as I said, it's been spoken in Ireland for maybe 2,500 years. It is something that we like to boast about. It is the third oldest written language in Western Europe, the oldest being Greek and the second being Latin. And Irish people began to write down their language in the 6th century Common Era, and they started by writing nature poetry and also writing canal glosses on the sides of manuscripts, Latin manuscripts. These were often monks, and so our written tradition goes back to that. In the medieval times, there were bardic schools in Ireland, and there were professional bards who would work for the chieftains and who would glorify them and make up all sorts of fantastical genealogies of them, which would trace back their lineage to characters in Irish mythology and also characters in the Bible. So that was their job. Over time, and as the colonization by the English of our island continued, the Irish language lost ground. It lost status. The bardic schools collapsed at one point. The Catholic religion, which was, I suppose, support to the Irish language, was really suppressed in the 17th, 18th century. And it was the Great Famine, really, of the 1840s, which was really I think it was the event which broke the spirit, in certain way, of Irish-speaking Ireland. And 1 million people roughly died in that famine, and 1 million people emigrated in the years shortly after, in the 1850s. And that process of emigration continued really up until very recent times. And it was kind of dying out in the early 2000s, and then the last kind of great recession we had started it all up again. But those people that were lost in the Great Famine and emigrated, many of those people were Irish speakers. So the population of Irish speakers went from 4 million people at the beginning of the 19th century, and by the time we won our freedom and set up our own independent country about 100 years ago now, the population of Irish speakers had dropped drastically. So at the moment, there are about 75,000 people who speak Irish as a daily language in their lives, in their home setting and so forth, in their community. Where I'm based here on the west coast of Ireland, west of Galway City, is one such community. And those communities these days, to be honest, are under huge cultural pressure from the online world, from the way that young people don't have that same sense of kind of being rooted in a place anymore, because they are so much, living their lives in the online digital world, and they're, I suppose, citizens of the world in a certain way, of the digital world anyway. But it's not all bad, because in sort of the second half of the 20th century up to the present day, there has been a big development of immersion schools in the Irish language in Ireland. And these have become increasingly popular. They are seen as being quite prestigious these days. So these schools they were kind of based originally on the Canadian model of immersion, that was where French was spoken in school, and everything was taught through French to children whose home language was English. So that's how most of those schools work. Increasingly, I think children coming to those schools are a bit more bilingual than they used to be, and those schools are really important to us as a publisher. So literacy in Irish, up until the time that we achieved our freedom, the Irish language was not taught in schools in Ireland, and when we set up our own system, it was taught to all children. And that was a success story in some ways, maybe not always an emotional success story in terms of turning people around back towards the Irish language, because I think that people had been so traumatized by the famine that kind of memory lived on for a long time, and it was hard for people to get beyond that. But it has taken a few generations in a way. But even since I began working in the Irish language, some 30 years ago in various roles, I taught in one of those Irish medium schools as a young man. I was involved in Irish language television for years, and then I branched into publishing. As the years have gone by, I think that the positivity about the Irish language has grown and grown and grown, and now it's possible for a small publishing company like us to develop and thrive, and that's what's happened. But there is also, Irish kind of oral culture is really famous around the world, especially the music. And there is a lot of kind of material which is kind of in that area of our culture, which is really still very much alive in Irish-speaking areas. I'm talking about traditional rhymes and traditional word games and so forth. And that is kind of where we started as a publisher. The first book I'm going to show you, I have a whole pile of books off screen here, but the first book I'm going to show you is not a translated book. It's an original book of traditional rhymes. And that book was kind of what started our company, Futta Fata. And that book has been hugely popular. It was illustrated by an animation studio called Cartoon Saloon, who have long form animation films and have had a few Oscar nominations. And this book includes a CD, which is really kind of almost more important than the book, I feel, which was made from field recordings of young children and from the sort of adult adult generation and old people, and they were all kind of weaved together with sounds and sound effects and so forth. So that's kind of really the bedrock of our publishing company. So when that came out in 2005, and after that came out, I decided it was like a one-off project to begin with. I hadn't really intended to get so deep into publishing as I did, but because it had been really, really well received, I decided that, you know, maybe I could do more in this publishing business. I had that background in primary school teaching. I had young children, 4 young children, so I was quite motivated to do that work. So I started going to the Bologna Book Fair that Megan mentioned when we had our quick chat earlier, and I found some books to translate. And this is one of the first books that we translated, and it was originally published. I'm just trying to line things up with the screen here. So it was originally written in Californian in California, and it also includes a CD. So this was a kind of a bridge from my work in music and rhymes to a book with a CD, and we reproduced an Irish language version of that with a CD, and we had children kind of voicing on the CD as the original book had. And this book, I suppose, is an example of what you might call versioning rather than translation. And versioning is a verb that you hear a lot in the animation world, and I have a background in that and in television in general. And that is like that you would take a story, you would take kind of you wouldn't really change the story, but that you would adapt it pretty freely and feel pretty relaxed about doing that. So that was kind of even the way that the title changed from a frog thing, and the idea behind that was that Frank the frog's parents were saying, you know, Frank wanted to fly, and his parents were saying, you know, you can do anything, but flying is not a frog thing. Well, that was impossible to translate to Irish, so it became Frog sa Spéir, which means a frog in the sky, and that's the title under which it has become known in Ireland. I am also interested and have a lifelong interest in the French language, and so I read French and I speak it after a fashion, and we have found quite a few books in the Francophone world that we have published in Irish. This one was originally called Nina et le Chat, and it was published by a company in Belgium called Mijad. And Mijad were almost like mentors to me when I started out in publishing. I was just at the time, it was a one-man band at the time. I published a number of their picture books in Irish versions, and got very friendly with them and are still friendly with them. I'm really looking forward to meeting them again in Bologna. And it's an example of the sort of collegiate kind of spirit and the spirit of cooperation and just friendliness that I find in the book world, especially in the children's book world and the book world in general, which I value and really, really enjoy. Now, here's another version of another example of a book that we published in a slightly different way. This is a book from Dutch, and it was published originally by Abimo. I think this is the only book we did with Abimo, and they're either in Dutch or in Dutch-speaking Belgium. I can't remember which, and that's an awful thing for an Irishman to say. But anyway, this book it's kind of a birthday story, and I don't speak or read Dutch, but we were sent an English translation of the book, and from that English translation we developed this Irish language edition. Meg agus Colleen Nice Irish Names on the birthday. And that book was worked really well for us. It was popular. So then we had done that for some years. We'd worked with Mijad, we'd worked with Abimo, we'd worked with Chavis, we'd worked with a number of publishers in Europe, in mainland Europe mostly. And the odd one, we didn't do a huge amount from English in picture books. So the Frog thing, Frogs' Despair, is a bit of an exception. So then we had kind of figured out how it works. We had figured out what a 32-page picture book was. We had learned a lot about how co-edition translation works and co-edition production of books works, and or how you could, if you didn't join a co-edition, get all the books printed at the same time in different language editions. What you could do is you could buy the rights. So we had done that from a point of view of translating inwards. So we decided to have a go at doing it the other way around. So what we did was that we organized a workshop. I got in contact with an old friend in the animation industry who is from America, actually lives in London, called Barbara Slade, who is a really excellent story consultant and a really excellent creative consultant and a good friend. And Barbara came over and she did a workshop with a number of possible writers. And from those workshops, we did 2 years of those workshops, came quite a number of books. And this is one of the first books that we published from that kind of generation of books, our very first book. It was written by Bridget Vanach, who is from this area of Connemara, Irish-speaking Connemara, and it's called Lulu Agus an Ihe Glórach, which means Lulu and the Noisy Night. And I'm showing you this edition of it because I just want to explain how a minoritized language like us, which is spoken fluently and daily by 75,000 people here on our island on the western edge of Europe, how you get it out into the wider world when so few people speak it. And the answer is that we have used our facility in the English language as a way of promoting our work, our Irish language work. So when we make a 32-page picture book, what we generally do is that we design and print an English language version. We don't publish the book in English generally, but we will just maybe print 30, 40 copies. And even that is becoming less of a thing nowadays because you don't need the printed book as much as you used to. You can just, put a PDF together to a good high standard of design, and you can send that to publishers who will, who will either acquire the rights or won't acquire the rights. But happily, when we started in 2010 at the Frankfurt Book Fair, we did get interest in Lulu, and our first edition outside Ireland was in Chinese. This edition, it was closely followed by an edition much closer to home in Scots Gaelic, in Gaelic na Holoban. And there have been a number of other editions. This is a picture book that I wrote myself about a grumpy bear who just wants to be alone in the winter, and that's not how things work out. And that has been printed. That has been published in a number of. That has been printed in a number of Asian languages. That's the Korean version. It's also come out in Chinese. And a few years ago in Dublin for Chinese New Year, we did a reading and an event based on the book, where I read the book in Irish, and we had a Chinese person who read the Chinese edition, and then we had another reader who read it in English. So we were covering all bases and covering quite a lot of the planet. And then we had activities around the book as well, and it was just such a lovely day, and lovely to meet children who would enjoy the book in a language other than the one in which it was written. and we had organized copies of the Chinese edition, which we gave out to the Chinese-speaking children of Dublin, and that was a lot of fun. So I just show you just a few more. This is one of our most successful in terms of the amount of different editions that we have sold internationally. So this is Misha agus an Dragon, which means literally me and the dragon. So it's about this little bear who dreams of being a brave dragon hunter when he grows up. But he also thinks while he's having these dreams about how scary that could be and whether or not he's going to be able to do it. So it's quite a subtle kind of a psychological sort of a book. And it was greeted with great acclaim in France, where it was published in French, and it was also published in Breton, which is a language which is also related, like Gaelic is related to Breton, though it's a much more distant relation. So it came out in Breton, it came out in Korean, and in top marks for anybody who could tell me what that language is. That is the Afrikaans edition. So it was published in South Africa, and I believe it got to readers in Namibia as well. I think there are quite a few Afrikaans speakers in Namibia, and that's the Chinese edition. And I think there might be one more. Those are all the editions I could find. So then we still publish kind of books that are in the same kind of spirit as this original one. That is, this book, would not get translated abroad because the traditional verse and songs and so forth in this book would not be really much interest, or rather certainly of limited interest outside Ireland, and certainly in translation it would be in limited interest, because even a lot of it is about wordplay and actually the joy of kind of playing with the Irish language. So we have published other books where we really don't we don't expect to do much in terms of outward translation, but we just feel that these books and these stories are such an important part of our culture that we just want to do it, and we just love these stories so much that we want to recreate them and to present them again in a new way to young readers. And this is one called An Féileacáin agus an Rí, and that title means The Butterfly and the King, and it is an Irish myth which must be at least going on 1,000 years old, and has existed in both kind of oral and written forms. It's available in medieval manuscripts and so forth. And we did a kind of a 21st century version of that with really some really beautiful illustration work. And let me show you. I'm really so proud of this book, and it's just such a joy to work with the illustrator and the writer. But the illustrator is a woman called Shona Shirley MacDonald, who grew up in Scotland, and her father is a Gaelic speaker. But because Gaelic is not in the same kind of doesn't have the same status in Scotland, she never learned to speak it. But she is now settled and married in Ireland, and she's learning to speak Irish. And anyway, we didn't really expect that there would be much interest abroad in that book. And because of the pandemic, it came out during COVID times, so we didn't have much time, we didn't have much opportunity to present it abroad, because the Bologna Book Fair wasn't happening for the last 2 years. But it managed to get out there all the same. This is the Romanian version of the book, and there was also interest from Brittany, and this is the Breton edition of the book. So those are the books that's outward translation. I wanted to speak just quickly now about inward translation. So we have done picture books, like I've shown you. We've also done books that have sort of enriched our own kind of approach to original books. So these short novels, they're about 5,000 words or so, 5,000, 7,000 words, and they were published by specialist publisher. The original English versions were published by a specialist publisher in Edinburgh, Scotland, called Barrington Stoke, and they publish books for reluctant readers, and they commission well-known UK writers to write books which have like a really excellent sense of story, but the books are quite short, and they are they're easy to read, and these have been very popular in Irish because a lot of the children who attend the immersion schools I told you about, Irish is not their first language, so they are reading Irish as a second language. So they are very open and happy to read a good story that's well put together, well structured, but is quite short. And those books have done very well for us, and they have also helped us and inspired us to publish books which are of the same kind of style, but which are original. And this is a story about a young boy called Nizar, who is from Syria. This is an original book of ours. He's from Syria, and he had to flee the war, and now he has ended up in Ireland, and he's living in a hotel with his mother and his twin sisters, and his mother is expecting a baby. He doesn't know where his father is, and he feels lost, and he feels kind of hopeless. And then one day he meets a new friend who is as lost as himself, a little dog, and he smuggles him into the hotel room. And it's a story of beautiful humanity, and it's a story that really touches children. It really touched me when the writer came and pitched it to me. And so that's, we're really proud to kind of publish a book like that, which has something to say about Ireland and the world of the 21st century. This is another book in a similar style. It's also an original book, and we have another one in that kind of original series, which is a time traveling book. So that's that. So we have also done a series which are really well known in the English language world, and that came up some years ago. There was always a bit of a resistance among funders of Irish language publishing to that idea of publishing books from English, because it was felt that Irish children, they speak English fluently, generally speaking, and they read English fluently. So what is the point of publishing books for them that are freely available in English? Wouldn't it be a better idea to find other books from, the European continent or anywhere else in the world and present those books to them as a new kind of a title? And that, in theory, is wonderful, and that in practice is valid, and that we have done that. But anyway, we got the chance to translate more from English, so we decided to have a go at translating some really, really well-known books. They mightn't be well-known where you live, but they in the English-speaking world, they're really well-known. So this one is actually quite well known all over the world. I think it's called Diary of a Wimpy Kid. It's an American series, and it's kind of the conceit is that this kid, he is writing his diary, and he's also drawing pictures of kind of his life. So it's a kind of a sitcom kind of a feel to it, and it's really very popular in English. I mean, hugely popular. So we published it in Irish, and it was only then that we discovered that the author, Jeff Kenny, is actually a proud Irish American, and that his people are from Ireland. They immigrated some generations back, and he was genuinely very excited that his book was available in Irish. And he actually, on his world tour the year after the book came out, he came deliberately to Dublin. He included Dublin in his world tour, and children who had read the book in the Irish edition got to meet Jeff. And we also ran a competition, a public competition, to ask children to get involved in the translation of the book by translating the title of the book and the title of the series. And the winner was a young girl, about 11, 12, from here in Connemara. So when Jeff came to Dublin, and that young girl, Aisling, I think her name was, got to meet him, and Jeff Kenny gave an hour of his time to her and her family, and also to the translator and her children. So it was a really um, special session. So I think we have now 5 books of the Wimpy Kids series in translated to Irish. They have been a big success for us. They have sold, in very respectable quantities. And we have also done. There's also a spin-off series, and we have done one book from that series as well. Another series, or another name that's very well known in Ireland, is David Walliams, and those books are they're much more substantial, much bigger word count. I think that book is about like 24,000 words or something, and there aren't actually that many books of that kind of that kind of length in Irish. So I think bilingual children who have read the book in English are very happy to read it again in Irish. It's not it's a different kind of an experience for them, but it's interesting to say this to translators. But I think these books, these Irish editions of books that they probably have known and read and enjoyed in English before they read them in Irish, these books give them an opportunity, in a way, to think about their bilingualism, and also to think about the process of translation, and almost to have a kind of a dialogue with the translation, and kind of say, why was it translated like that, and what's this bit about? And our translators have had those kind of conversations with children, so it's very interesting, and so I'm completely kind of. I'm completely convinced that now that it's a good idea. So I have a question. So you domesticate the books and you change the names. Well, we didn't really change the names that very much. We made some kind of cultural changes, but not so much. Like Williams' books they're very English, and there's a lot about now and again comes up about the royal family, which would kind of be a bit of a problem here in Ireland. So we kind of skirt around that stuff, but that's kind of the most stuff that we kind of, I suppose, domesticate. The Wimpy Kid stuff, I think we just kind of accept that children know that it's an American series and that there's no need to kind of pretend that it isn't. So we use the original names, and we translate it. We just find a voice in Irish that works, and we translate it, fairly faithfully. The last kind of thing I want to show you in terms of inward translation is verse translation, and this is something that I do myself personally, because I have this background in verse and song and so forth. So I really love the challenge of working with verse. So these books are very, very, very popular in Ireland, and they're huge in the UK. And the reason that they're popular in Ireland is that Ireland is, even though we're in an independent country in terms of the book world, an awful lot of books which are published in the UK are pretty much exported to Ireland. So when you walk into a bookshop in Ireland, up to 85% of the books on the shelves all around you have been published in the UK. So we are working in this kind of small segment that 15% of the books are published in Ireland, and the Irish language section is smaller again. So it's a niche, but it's a niche that's growing, and it's a niche that is well supported, I'm happy to say. So these books are they're an interesting challenge for a translator. They're kind of adaptations. They're verse adaptations, and the way I translate them is that it's almost like a a Sudoku or a crossword kind of a challenge for me. I spend a few months. I don't put any big kind of deadline on the job. I just begin, now and again doing 4 lines here, 4 lines there, revising as I go. Just kind of keep at it, and over a period of some months, I come up with a translation version in Irish that I'm happy with. And it has to work out loud. It has to work to be something that I could have fun performing, because that's something I like to do. And unlike, say, the David Walliams books, where kids have come to the point where they discover David Walliams or the Wimpy Kid. This year we're going to do our first Dog Man title, which is also a huge, big series in the English language world. But unlike those books, these books, I would imagine that there are quite a few Irish-speaking children who will come to these books in Irish and will never see them in English. Because that's kind of the reason I say that. It's kind of, that's my memory of picture books as a parent. There are quite a few series that had been published in Irish. Like one is that's still being published today. I think it's been published in Irish for 40 years. It's a little flap book about a dog. In English, he's called Spot, and in Irish, he's called Bran. And Bran was one of the famous hounds of Finn McCool, which is he's like a kind of a Superman of the Irish language and of Irish mythology. So Bran was, a presence in my own adult children's childhood, and he's still kind of, he's still there today. If you walk into a bookshop that has Irish language books, you might very well find a Bran. So that's kind of what I had to say, really. What I will do now is I will look at the questions, and I hope I haven't been too inefficient about the questioning point of view. Okay, so Pilar, do you feel that it is growing in the last couple of years? How has Brexit impacted the publishing world? Do you think the future will bring more Irish publications and publications in Irish? Okay, so yes, I do feel that it has grown in the last couple of years. I think that the online world, while online culture, in some ways is desperately problematic in terms of the political culture of the planet, but in terms of minorities and in terms of kind of helping people who live in minority cultures to connect and feel a sense of community, the online social media world is invaluable. And the social media world has been hugely important in helping us get to our audience when the Anglophone press in Ireland it has improved a lot, I must say. But when we started out, it was difficult to get an article or a review or any sort of interest in what we were doing in the Anglophone press. And the Anglophone press is very, very important because a lot of Irish speakers, all Irish speakers, they read newspapers in English because there are a number of online newspaper stroke publications in Irish, but I suppose the prestige of the English language newspapers is much more important. So the whole social media scene has really helped us to kind of break through and reach our audience directly and have more control of our message, and originate our own content on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and we're now looking at TikTok as well, to get kind of our message out there directly to our readership and I suppose the gatekeepers who buy the books for our children.
Owen has a question for you. I think he has his hands raised as well, and Megan just typed something on the chat, but we'll bring Owen in. Yeah.
Okay, Owen. Yeah.
Yeah, hi Ty. Thanks very much for that. That was very interesting. I have kind of a vulgar question, if you forgive me for it.
Oh, go for it.
Yeah. So you spoke, and you know the cultural value of the work that's been done is invaluable, I guess is the word for it. But I wonder how the funding has affected the work that, and I guess I'm asking you with both your translator and your publisher hat on, whether there's any kind of market study done when making the decision to bring something like Diary of a Wimpy Kid into Irish. You know, that's why it's a vulgar question because I'm asking about money when the
Okay.
value of what you're doing is obviously it's clearly beyond money. But I thought it'd be interesting to ask.
Okay. I don't quite understand your vulgar question, but I'm very open to it.
Okay.
So, what are you asking exactly? Is it the importance of funding, or?
Yeah, to talk a little bit about how the translations have been funded, or
Oh, sure.
and it's just a thought that came across my mind when you were talking about Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I was wondering when you're choosing a title to translate into Irish, whether you're thinking of the number of people that might be interested in it, whether there's a market for it, or is the market implicit or is the market created by translating the book itself?
Okay, very good question. Yes, okay. I'll tell you. I think this is the key to publishing, right? In general, and in a global way, is that the best type of publishing, in my mind, is finding a kind of a mix between stuff that's good and will sell and will keep you afloat and will keep you going and will also, you know, provide a kind of a cash flow for more just sort of what the Americans call passion projects. Now, we are not, happily, we are not dependent totally on the vagaries of the book market. We are funded, and we are funded happily in Ireland from a number of organisations. We are funded by an organisation called First na Gaeilge, which is like the Irish language. Anyways, the Irish language organisation, which promotes the Irish language, and we're also funded by a more like educational organisation who are funding us to create books which would work in schools. But they're quite kind of liberal about it. They're not looking for very kind of educational books. Like a number of the David Walliams and the Wimpy Kid books have been funded by them, and the thinking behind that is that it will promote literacy and it will promote just children practicing to learn to read in Irish and actually enjoy it, and doing it in an unconscious way because they like it. But those books do sell well, and the thing about it is that they have fantastic brand awareness among booksellers in Ireland. Uh, there are very, 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 very few fluent Irish speakers in the book selling community. I mean, really very few. They would have a certain level from school and so forth, and they are open to it. If it sells, you know, in a bookshop, it absolutely works. So they're kind of neutral about it. Now, obviously, English language editions and all sorts of other stuff is going to make them more money, and their shops, their books, their shelf space is an important asset to them, and they are not cultural organizations. They are, commercial businesses. But those books sell well for us, and they don't. Our original picture books, our original books in general, would not sell as well, especially in bookshops. They might sell, better directly to schools or other ways of getting to children. But between the two, I think we have a nice mix, and it helps us to kind of develop skills in translation, to develop skills in original writing in Irish, and it also kind of it creates, like I was showing you those short novels. It kind of creates a sort of role models in terms of books So I can say, I can give somebody like a translation from Barrington Stoken and say, could you write me something like that? Go away, and here are 3 or 4 examples of this kind of book. Could you go away and come back to me with a few ideas in this kind of area that would work? And then we can present them as part of that collection in our catalogue of these kind of short novels. And we also, even better than the translation, we now have an Irish author who can also, do events and who can, promote the books, and it becomes a kind of a useful part of their development in terms of their career and so forth. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah. I mean, it answers the question, and it answers my follow-up question as well. So you take both boxes. Thanks for that, Tadhg.
Okay, thank you.
Brilliant. You have a question by Megan in the chat. 2 questions by Megan. Have you connected with publishers in Wales, and do you have Welsh language bookshops?
Have we connected with publishers in Wales? We have had some discussions with publishers in Wales. To date, we have not had any success in terms of working together. And I always thought, maybe it's an awful cliche, but I always thought that dragon book that has been all over the world was kind of made from Wales. But maybe Welsh publishers don't want to be kind of stereotyped with dragons. But it hasn't happened yet. But there is an Irish language publisher in Belfast called Tadhg Mac Dhonnagain, and they have an ongoing kind of partnership with graphic books, and that seems to be working out really well. I would love to have an ongoing kind of partnership in Wales. We have an ongoing partnership in Brittany, and that has been a very pleasant experience for us. And we have done some work, not in recent times, but we have done quite a bit of back and forward with Scotland as well. So yeah, it would be lovely to work with Wales because they're just so, geographically close and spiritually close as well, I think.
Fantastic. Yeah, I used to work for Graphic.
Okay.
I work in publishing as well, you see. So I'm just, but yes. So I know like Malachy Doyle well and Andrew.
Okay.
Yeah. But anyway, I look forward to talking to you, at Bologna.
And I will show you my dragon book.
Yes. Yeah, please do. Okay.
Thank you, Megan.
Oh, sorry. So, but just a quick question, and again, it's just general. But do you have like in Ireland, like separate Welsh language bookshops?
Irish language bookshops.
Yeah.
Yes, there are a number. So, how many of those are there? There's one really good one in Dublin. There's one really good one in Belfast, and then in here in the village where I live, there is a really good bookshop, which is almost entirely Irish language material. There's one, so there might be at this stage they have become that sector has developed. There would be maybe 5 or 6 of them, and then there would be like in Galway City, Charlie Byrne's bookshop, for example, which is a real institution in Galway City, and it's a lovely old bookshop, and they have a really good Irish language section, and they are philosophically really open to it, and we have done a lot of events with them. And Kenny's books as well in Galway are also really, quite a number of the Kenny family are Irish speakers, and it's the 3rd or 4th generation of that family in the book trade now, and the Irish language was always kind of really part of the mix in that shop. So you have that kind of mix, I suppose. You have the the pure kind of Irish language bookshops, and then you have bookshops who have a kind of a heritage of working with the Irish language. There's at least one in Cork City. So yeah, and then the rest are just the regular independent bookshops, and they will have a section, and it's usually not huge, and they will sell what they think will sell.
And a final question, I promise. Sorry. Roughly, what would be your percentage, do you think, of selling into schools and bookshops? Of interest?
It depends on the book in a certain way, and I think like the those kind of very, high profile translations, an awful lot of those are sold through the bookshops, and in respectable numbers. Like we would print between 2,000 and 3,000 of those books as an initial print run, and then we would reprint, within maybe a year or 18 months. And I know internationally that is actually very respectable. That's a good print run, and even for languages who have like 40 million native speakers, that's a really good print run. And I suppose we're lucky. It's probably true in Wales as well, but Irish people love books, and books are an important part of our culture, and bookshops are an important part of our life here in Ireland, I do believe. And so that kind of works to our favour as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. And don't apologize, Megan. Any questions are welcome. I'm actually loving the fact that people are taking up the mic and the camera and whatnot. I have a question about, you were talking about selecting books into Irish from, I think you mentioned Brittany. Now I'm all jumbled up with my cold. But how do you make those decisions? And I'm not expecting that there's a clear policy. I know the serendipity of finding a book that you really like in a book fair, and that's it. How are you attracted? What would be the spirit of Hutafata when you try to find things to be translated into Irish for children of Ireland?
Okay, well, I suppose I'm a story guy, and I have, that my background is in story and in story structure and character and those kind of principles. And I also have I have a love for illustration as well. So there is a kind of there are what you might call cultural norms in illustration, which are kind of subtle. Like this afternoon, I got an online portfolio from a French illustrator, and as soon as I opened, and looked at the images, it completely said France to me, in a really, really clear way. And it's not just like, it's not all, it's not like French icons or anything, but like the rabbits, the way that woman kind of draws a rabbit is just, it's a French rabbit. I mean, I would recognize that's a weird thing to say, but they are completely different from Anglophone rabbits, but they are. It's true. And German illustration is to my mind is kind of, it looks quite old fashioned. And I know that there was a researcher here one time who was working on a PhD and came to visit us, and we had a great chat. It was just such a fantastic exchange. I hope she picked up some interesting things for her research. But she was talking about illustration, and she was saying that in the Scandinavian countries, they're not really interested in cuteness. That cute is kind of possibly seen as being a bit kitsch, maybe. Whereas their illustration is kind of, there's lots of little cultural references going on in it that would not probably be that that obvious to people from outside that part of the world. And then you see, like, go and see, a lot of it has to do with illustration, but also the story. I'm just looking for a character. I'm looking for an emotional journey. I'm looking for humor or whatever, but I'm looking for something with kind of with heart. That's really important to me. So that's it's a bit subjective, but I think it really works in the Irish market, and so I'm sticking to my guns.
Yeah, I completely hear you. I found really interesting what you said about the possibility of having the English and the Irish version for children. With this book, for example, with the Diary of a Wimpy Kid, I did ages ago now a bit of research on the translation of Harry Potter as an Orlach, and Maura used to say that when she did the readings around the libraries in Ireland, the children basically burned her alive because they had all read Harry Potter in English first, and now they were reading the Irish, and they
Yeah.
knew perfectly well what she had done wrong or what she hadn't been allowed
Yes.
to do, or
Yes.
everything, and it was fantastic. I remember I met her in Dublin, and she was telling me all about this with the pure enjoyment of saying I had critics in front of me. I
Yes.
had great translator critics in front of me
Yes.
saying this person doesn't sound like this. Why did you do this? And I had to defend myself against them more than sometimes I have to defend myself against an editor or anyone like that. And as you said, that sometimes is completely missed. And I mean, of course, you don't want to rely totally on products from English or from even from other languages, of course.
Sure.
And we need to nurture the authors that are writing in Irish as well. But I think that's fantastic that you're gonna use that and you're gonna occasionally promote it, because I think, as you said, it does bring into the new generation the awareness of translation and how translation works.
Yes, yeah, and I didn't kind of see that coming, if you know what I mean. And when I recognized what was happening, I just realized that, you know, it was really worth doing, and that because my own daughter, you know, is an avid, she's a young adult now, but an avid reader, and you know, there are books that she would read again and again, just for the pleasure of reading them and just being with the characters, like listening to a song you love. And what I found with those, like Wimpy Kid, David Williams, those kind of area, is that kids will reread them in that same spirit as my daughter was rereading a book in English, is just to kind of experience it. But then there's this added layer, now improved with Irish.
Completely. And you just said it, like one thing that I am discovering with my own daughter, and she's only 7, is that she likes watching and reading the same story over and over again. And with Lulu, agus hija glórach, she makes me translate it into English and into Spanish. And today we read in Spanish, Mom, and tomorrow it's the Irish version. But it's the same as I just want that book, but now you tell me in different language, like every day.
Yeah.
However she feels like, and there's that enjoyment of it's still the story I recognize, but we're gonna play with the words if you wish.
Yes.
In different
Yes.
languages. So well done for recognizing that. Do you think the highlight of my night when you said that, I was like, yes, someone else sees this, because I think it's a great thing that in this country sometimes it's not exploited enough. The fact that they, even in the schools, as you said, and I do with young adults now because I teach in college, but I do these kind of games with them in which like there's one course that I teach translation, children in translation, and I use the Harry Potter text because it's so easy to find in different languages, and they love seeing that play of this is the Irish version, this is the Spanish version. These are people that would have 2 or 3 languages, and how it's moved a little bit, and what are the movements, and just the first encounter with translation, really, without any technicalities behind it, but just trying to spot it, almost like the 7 differences kind of games in the magazines, or more like a game.
Yes. Yeah. Very good. Yeah.
We've been distracted little by little. There's 5 of us in the room. So if there's any other questions or anything you want to add, Ty, feel free to do so. We're well past 7, so I think we've exploited you enough today.
Yeah. No. I hope you enjoyed it.
I loved it.
I certainly did. Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Yeah, thank you very much. And I love the questions and how people engaged as well.
Likewise.
It's definitely a joy to see that. Yeah, and best of luck with your nomination. And
thank you.
Well, I know that in my house we look forward to reading more and more stories from your publisher, publishing company.
I'm delighted to do that. Good mille mahag.
Good mille mahag agus ihawa. Bye now.
Right. Okay. Good mahag. Thank you very much. Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening. Diolch yn fawr.